Okay, good morning, first of all. Thanks everyone for joining, and welcome to our deputy training session on the scheduling basics. My name is Felix. I'm joined today by my colleague Sam, who's going to run us through the actual training session. Next slide, Sam. Perfect, thank you. That's us. And yeah, we're going to run you through this today. Things that we're going to cover today is the different scheduling views, creating and managing shifts, ways to automate your roster, how to schedule public holidays and block time off requests. And at the end of this session, we're going to have a Q&A section where you can ask questions if you have any. Cool. And in between, there's also the option to ask questions, not really verbally, but what you can do is there's a little button at the bottom where you can just type in your question, just as it says here in the explanation, and then we will answer them throughout this whole session. Cool. With that said, I'm going to give over to my colleague Sam, who's going to walk you through this now, and then we're going to hear each other again at the end of this, at the Q&A section. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Felix. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, so today what I'll do is I'll just start by doing a quick introduction to Deputy. Some of the industries that we've done really well serving is generally the retail, the hospitality, and the healthcare. And just look over to the right there, and there's some of the companies that we've helped. But we've helped companies big and small really improve their business operations. And you might be asking, what exactly is Deputy? It's a comprehensive and cloud-based time and attendance platform that allows your users and team members and employees to really engage in coverage and requirements of businesses. And a lot of the laborious admin is really made a lot easier. And I'm going to show you today exactly how much easier it can get when it comes to scheduling, which is where most Deputy users spend the most amount of time. But what I'll do is I'll just jump in here. So it's just the title page here, but we're actually going to jump into an account that we've prepared just with some general aspects, really to show you how we can improve scheduling. So let me just jump over. So what you'll see here, we've got ourselves Tony's Flowers. And what we want to do really is start by going through a lot of the buttons that we've got at the top of the screen here and on the left-hand side, because this is going to drastically change how you see Deputy and all of the shifts that you're managing. Pardon me 1 second. Okay, so what we've got is if we just start from the top left here, this button here is always going to drop a pin based on the location that you're sitting on. And, and based on the address that's been put in, we'll show you exactly where it's at. This button here is going to give you a list of all the locations that have been set up. So what you can do is this, this first option here is going to be like the main parent company at the very top. And if I just click on that, it's actually going to show all of the locations beneath it. And then also we have this terminology here, which is areas, but you might notice it as duties or like other business requirements, like certain cleaning duties and stuff like that. But what we've got here is we've just got duties or areas split up between certain duties, as I say. So you've got like store managers, sales, online orders, stock take, and events within this location here. If we have it as all locations, what it's going to do is it's going to show literally all the locations beneath it and the shift slots that are available. But what I'll do is I'll make it a bit more specific, and we'll use Tony's Flowers HQ here to help change that. What we'll see is it drastically changes our view to specific shifts that we've set up. Okay, so, pardon me. So firstly, when you're interacting with these buttons up here, it's gonna really dictate and try and reflect how you're wanting to do your scheduling, how you want to set up your roster. At the moment, I have it as this button here, view by area by week. Now, this is important because this is going to really reflect how you want to tackle your rostering. So if I want to tackle my rostering on a weekly basis by area, which is essentially I'm trying to figure out what my coverage is going to be like, then weekly is going to be the best way for me to tackle it. If I go over here, this one here is actually also reflecting the week that I'm trying to set up my rostering for. So this is last week. So I've already got all of my published shifts there ready to go. But what I might do is I might just go over to a blank week and you'll see that there's nothing there. So what we're going to try and do today is I'm going to show you how I got this week to where it is, where, there's no blanks, we've got coverage, we've got people working where I want them to be. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to change a very blank, even like a very bleak looking, blank roster into something that's really comprehensive and set up. And it's not going to take you too much time. So firstly, I'll just go over some of the last buttons that are really important to get an idea of. If I am going to tackle my rostering instead of on a weekly basis, but on a fortnightly basis, if you click on that drop-down menu, you can just change it to 2 week. And as you can see, it's got that week that I set up earlier, but it's got the next following week as well. And another way that people might want to organize their coverage is actually, instead of on a weekly basis, a daily setup. And if I click on that, it gives me a very comprehensive breakdown for that day that you select here by the hour. And this is really important if you've got very, very important coverage requirements and you need to have that almost under a microscope. And this is going to allow you to get really into the details there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to weekly view. And again, we're going to see that coverage. The hours, like on the daily view, the hours are going to be specified within the small shift slots that we've set up. Cool. Another like structure of view that we can change it, instead of view by area, we're going to go view by employee. Now this is going to start to make sense of why we've got people on the left-hand side here. But if I go to weekly view, can you see how the left-hand side where I have all of my team members for Tony's Flowers HQ start to get married up with the lines? So this panel here starts to make sense with what's going on here. So myself, I know that I'm in management for that week or in customer support for these days. It starts to actually make sense of the line items that we've got here. Now this is really good for making small adjustments as well, but we'll cover that in the creation of the shifts shortly. Another way that we want to actually see how people are starting to organize on the left-hand side panel here is by this drop-down menu here. It's going to tell us what kind of logic do we have applied to why people show up in the order that they're in. So at the moment, we just have display names, but we could have scheduling costs. We could have their age, the qualifications, and all that kind of stuff. But if we just go to total hours, do you see how it's changed it? Because I'm working the most amount of hours for the weekly view, it's put me at the top. If I want to flip the logic on that, I can just click this button here and it flips a switch there. It just changes it from ascending to descending and vice versa. And it makes it very easy to just start to look at the people who maybe in this case have a less amount of hours. And if Laurie here needs more hours, I can actually just see that she shows up on the top and start to prioritize her in the way that I set up some new shifts. All right. Lastly, there's a search icon here. Now, this search icon is going to be really handy for if I need to look for a specific person, or it also queries other parts as well, such as training requirements. So if I want to have a list of the people on the left-hand side that just shows me the people who are qualified in management or any other kind of training module that I've set up against an area and a person, then it'll show those results there when I type that training in. Oh, we've got nothing at the moment, but yeah. Once you set up training modules, it'll list. So if it's 1, 2, or 5 different training requirements you put against a person, you can actually search through them there rather than wait for a warning to let you know that that person is overqualified, underqualified for that shift. Cool. So we've gone through some of the buttons at the top here, but what I wanted to kind of reiterate is that these buttons are really going to try and reflect how you're trying to approach your rostering, because it's going to drastically change how, like, not only what you see in front of you in the roster there, but how certain other buttons that we're going to show a bit later interact with that part of it. So if I go back to the weekly view, and I want to clear this roster or copy it over to the following week, I can actually use this copy shifts button up here. And this is when we get into some of the automation. And this copy shifts button is going to allow me to push this comprehensive roster that I've set up into the following week. So I'm going to start that, pardon me, I'll go back to that. So if we go to copy shifts, hit to the copy next button, this is going to specify the date of last week that I was really happy with that roster, and push it over to the following week. I'll hit copy next. I can choose to skip it if I want to sit in a fortnightly basis. I can click on that and then copy it to the following fortnight if I wanted to. It'll specify the areas. If I'm just happy with the admin roster that I've set up, I can choose to leave out the other two areas that I've got. Or if I'm happy with the whole thing, I can choose to push it over to the next week. 1 second. There we go. And start copy. Wonderful. So that last week that I was really happy with has now been migrated over to the following week. This is really good time saver if I'm really setting up a quite a solid template for the previous week, and I'm going to be really happy with those same kind of shifts, and my people are going to be very happy with those same kind of shifts the following week. That's going to be the best, most time efficient way to create the roster for the following week. But what I might do is I'll just show you exactly what it looks like to set up those shifts on their own. So we're going to go to another new blank week here, and we're just going to click on this admin shift here, or this admin slot here, and we're going to click on this plus button. And this is going to show me a brand new shift for that particular date, which is the 18th of May. And what we do is we can start by figuring out who we want to be working in that shift. So if we have a look here, we can choose to set up an empty shift or an open shift. Now there's a drastic difference between those two, but I'll cover that in just a moment. What I'll do is I'll for this hypothetical, I'll keep in mind that I actually had Felix as the best person that I wanted to receive this shift. So I'll just select Felix. It'll show up his details. We want the area to be admin. Now the reason why it already shows admin there is because I clicked on that plus button underneath the admin area. Now, if we were in the people view, it would just open up a shift and then I would have to select the area. But it already knows that I had admin as the area in mind. That was kind of the starting point of this data that I was starting to input. So then I just had to fill it in with Felix's details. Now, shifts times can be done in two different ways, and it really just depends on the user and what's more comfortable for them. The first one is it's always going to do a 9 to 5 when your location settings for Tony's Flowers HQ in this case is set to 9 to 5. But you can set your opening hours and your like basic shift slots as different times, and it would populate different times in there. In this case, I actually want it to be 9:30. Now, if I just click on that area, it's actually going to show a drop down and I can just select 9:30, or instead I can just type it in. Now, if I just leave it in as 9:30 there, that's fine. But if I just type in 5, it will actually think 5 a.m. Now that's actually wrong because I don't want it to be 9:30 to 5 a.m. I want it to be 9:30 to 5 p.m. Now what you can do is when you're actually typing it, you can actually work in 24-hour time. And it knows once I press enter that I've actually done it as 5 p.m. If I go back and edit that shift, I can also input the meal breaks and a second break as well. Now, lastly, before I go ahead and create this shift, I can add notes. these notes can be very important to communicate certain tasks or requirements, or just FYIs for someone like Felix or anyone receiving the shift to keep in mind at the start or before the shift starts. So I could put in a reminder about don't forget EOD closing procedure. And once I go ahead and hit save, it's actually going to create that shift. But what you'll notice is there's another button towards the right there that actually has a drop down. And I'll just move this panel out of the way. What it does is it's got a repetition function. I could be quite happy with this shift that I've made for Felix to not just be for Monday the 18th, and I could make it repeat for the Tuesday as well, or even the whole week. Or if I just click this button here, repeat for specific days, it's actually asked me to choose the days of the week that I want this to repeat for. So I could say that, well, Felix has got some commitments on Wednesday or Thursday, or I want him to work in a different area on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I'll go ahead and hit apply. And once it starts to think a little more, it will repeat the shift creation action that I've just done and do it for those days that I specified. But keep in mind, it's also going to keep the shift note that I applied to that shift creation as well. And it's going to get it ready for the publication as well, which I'll also spend a little time on shortly. Won't be too long, guys. Okay. Now, another way that we can action this repetition here that I mentioned is instead of doing it when we're creating the shift, we could in this hypothetical already have the shift that we're quite happy with. And you'll see that when you hover over the shift itself, along with having an edit button, you have a copy button. So if we go ahead and hit copy, then we can go into the next day and you'll see that not only do you have the plus button, but you have a paste button here too. You can click on that, or you can simply press V, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to do that pasting functionality that some of you might be familiar with. It could be Command C on a Mac or Control C on a Mac to copy a shift, and then the same thing but V at the end for the pasting function. Great. So what I've just shown you is how we can kind of automate some aspects of it. To reiterate, we've done just some simple copying of particular shifts that we're happy with, or we've engaged in some building of templates that we were happy with when we built out a roster and copied it and pasted it into a further week. So for example, just to reiterate, we had this particular week that we'd already set up and spent some time confirming with our team about their availabilities and such. And we've gone ahead and when we hit copy shifts, we've actually pasted it into the following week. This is all about building templates. So as time goes on, you'll build templates that you become more happy with, whether it's on a weekly snapshot that you're happy with or a fortnightly snapshot. You might be happy with a fortnight of roster that you've built. And then lastly, you can even work on a monthly basis. If you're really happy with a certain calendar date that you put in, let's say the month of May, so 1st of May to the 31st of May, if this is a full month of full shifts that were worked and that you were really happy with, you could do that same action of pushing whole rosters over to further weeks. Okay, let me just go back. And I'll go over to that blank week that we were working on earlier, because there's a few more really cool handy things that I wanted to show you. Another one that I wanted to quickly show you here is why certain people show up in this list of people here. It will like Deputy's actually going to let you know when certain people are physically not able to work. So what I'll do to illustrate this a bit further is I'll just quickly jump back. So let's have a look here. We've got Laurie, and Laurie's working in customer support there. If we go and try and add her into the management shift slot as well, if we scroll down, can you see how there's a little yellow icon that specifies overlapping? That means that Laurie can't be in two places at the same time. Deputy is going to make sure that as much human error as possible can be removed from the process. So a notification doesn't go to Laurie saying, hey, you're working in 2 places at the same time. That can be a bit difficult. So it's actually going to recommend on this list of people to put into the shift, people who aren't already committed to other shifts. Great. All right, let's pop over again to that empty week. What you'll notice in terms of colors is a really important kind of coding that we've got here, where we've got yellow shifts. These are unpublished shifts. These gray ones here are actually empty shifts. So I've gone ahead and actually put in, if I just press this plus button here and then hit the X button, it's just going to put in a general template, like a placeholder, so to speak, of an actual shift that we're going to want to fill at some point. So if we go ahead and hit edit, that empty shift can now be filled in. This is really good if you have a blank week and you know that you've got coverage in mind, but no availability just yet. You can go ahead and just hit plus buttons on each of the days that you need for coverage. And then once you get your availability from your team members as they're using Deputy, you go ahead and start assigning them really easily. Now, assigning people can be done in a few ways. As I mentioned, it can be done by just hitting edit and assigning them there. But there's another cool way that you can do it too. You can actually drag and drop people as well. So what I've done is I've clicked on Abby, I've held down on the click button, and I can just let go of the click button over the empty shift, and it's changed it from a gray empty shift to now a filled in unpublished shift. Now, you might have another question, which is, how do we get this shift? I'm happy with this roster that I created earlier. I'm just going to get rid of this empty shift. I'm really happy with this, but I now need to let my people know about this roster that I've created that I'm really happy for them to receive. At the very top right, it's going to show exactly how many shifts we've got to publish. So this list in the weekly view that I've got here is a total of 26 shifts. And I now want everyone, I want Jim and Felix, everyone to know about these shifts that I've created. So if I go ahead and hit publish, it's going to take us through a publication wizard. And it's going to ask us a few questions about how we want to communicate this roster. So firstly, it's going to ask us if we want to just publish the updates. Now, just publishing the updates will be if you've already published a shift and then later on you've made some minor adjustments about the start and end times, about the breaks, about all that kind of stuff, and you still want to let them know, then publishing the updates only is going to be handy. But what we're going to do is we're going to select publish all, because we've gone from no roster to now a full roster. And we want all of that information to be communicated to our team. So what we'll do is we'll hit next. Now this next function is going to take us to areas. So if I only want to let my people in customer support know of this roster change, then I go ahead and just keep customer support, because these might be the only ones that are actually our shift workers, whereas admin and management are more salary based and they know the days that they need to work. But in this case, I'd love for everyone to be aware of the coverage and stuff that I've set up. So I'll go ahead and hit next step. Lastly, this is the medium of communication that we're going to go forth with how our team members find out. There's a few options here. So firstly, the most popular one is the email and smartphone push notifications. So this one here is going to let everyone know of a new roster that's created or updates via an email from Deputy, from the business, and also from a smartphone push notification. So for any of our team members that are using Deputy on their phones, they'll get let known through a notification about these shifts. But we also have some options around SMS and smartphone. But please note that these come through as a telco charge of 0.05, so it's 5 cents in total to send these notifications. So this might be really handy for anyone who's posting very last minute changes to shifts and you would like to be a bit more sure that it goes to a more immediate medium, which is like, a text message. But if it's a weekly roster that we've set up together, it might be more cost effective and make a bit more sense just to do it by email and push notifications. But lastly, you can do no notifications. If the changes that you've made aren't really needed to be known about, then you can just select that. But what we'll do is we'll just do it this way for now, and we'll go ahead and hit publish. As you can see, it's let me know that everything's been changed and everything's now green. So that green is gonna notate that we've now published these shifts, and any edits that we do make will change them back to yellow, so an unpublished shift. So that's really good to know, because coloring of these shifts do make it easy to organize in your head about how this looks. To further illustrate this point, we're going to jump to Tony's Flowers Brisbane, and you'll see that the areas are actually color coded, and this can really help with making a lot of like sense and tidying up the roster, so you can really know your coverage based on color coding, which is handy. So to change it, to get Tony's Flowers HQ looking a little bit more like Brisbane here, we're going to change over to HQ, and you'll see that underneath each area, there's two buttons I want to show you. Firstly is the hide button. So if I'm only concerned with the rostering for customer support, I can go ahead and hide those other areas, and then I'm only going to see this, just so it's not as busy. Now next is the edit button next to the name of the area. And here is where I can change, and also, so change the name, but also change the color coding as well. I love purple. You can go ahead and put an export code, which is a payroll requirement sometimes, and then a training requirement as well. So I can pop in first aid if I need to, if people in customer support need some training in first aid. Lastly is preferred employees. So if I've got a list of people that only work in admin or management or customer support, I can pop them in. So it's only going to recommend employees that fit that criterion when I'm trying to get Deputy to do a bit more automation for me. All right. Now, lastly, before we move over to public holidays and blocking leaves, I just wanted to quickly show you that this button up here can be really, really handy to how you can set up some even more automation. So if I click over to another blank week and I go ahead and click auto, it's actually going to automatically fill in all of the shifts but query a lot of other parts of the Deputy account. Firstly, it's gonna query unavailability that your team members have filled in. It's going to make sure that anyone who's actually on leave is not going to get rostered in. And it's going to make sure that there's going to be no contentions with coverage with people who are already rostered into other areas. So it's a big, big time saver if you just press this button here. Deputy's going to spend a few minutes thinking, because it's communicating with so many different data points, about how to flesh out a automated roster that does its best to, make sure that you can go ahead and hit publish immediately. But it's not going to do that for you, that publication, because it's really going to want a set of human eyes to go over everything and make sure that you're happy with it before publishing that shift. But this is one of the biggest time savers that you can do, which is great. This auto build function, you can actually put in a few bits of information that help you do you can set up a bunch of empty shifts and then hit that button and it automatically pops them in, or you can actually get it to build the structure for you. So these two options can save you a ton of time. Okay, let's go back. Just before we go over to that last topic, I might just quickly jump back, and I can, let's say in this hypothetical, I can assume that I'm not really a big fan of these shifts here, but I don't want to have to laboriously go through, edit, and then delete each shift. What you can do is you can hit options here, and you can remove all of the employees from the shifts. You can remove the empty shifts. So if I hit empty, that gray shift for Friday is going to get kicked out there. It's gone. Or I can just straight up delete all shifts. So if I go ahead and do that, it's going to remove the shift and remove the people from it as well. There you go. I got a nice clean slate that I can work off from scratch. I can go ahead and hit auto. It'll spend a few minutes thinking and fill it all in for me. Some of the other options I quickly wanted to update you about is bulk update in itself. We won't go through it because it spends a few seconds thinking, but it's all about finding the data points that you want changed. So let's say it's comments or areas or employees, finding the person, and then go ahead and updating the criterion that you're actually filling in there. This is another way within that automation topic to save you a ton of time. Lastly, editing locations and areas can be a big time saver as well. But what we'll do is we'll flip over to the next one. Now, this last one is going to be really good when you're forecasting certain days that are coming up that are public holidays, and that you might need, let's say in this hypothetical, that you have a really busy day coming up because it might be a retail scenario, public holiday, tons of people coming in, I need all hands on deck. So if I go ahead and find that day, let's say it's this Friday here. If I click on these days, it's going to give us a few things that are handy. Firstly, the weather report, which is really cool. If you want to use the news feed to communicate with your team members about certain crazy weather days coming up, so you know, bring an umbrella, you can do that. But if we have a look a little bit further down here, we've got what's happening today. So I can change this Friday to a public holiday simply by clicking this tick box here. Now, do you see how it's changed it from one of those whiter days there to a red? So that notates that anyone working that day, if you've got a public holiday pay rate, it's going to make sure that it actually invokes that pay rate for those team members. Lastly, as I mentioned in the hypothetical, we've got like a more of an all hands on deck kind of scenario. You can actually click this button here and it blocks off time requests. So it's actually changed that to have that icon just there. That's going to be really handy. So any of your team members using Deputy can't actually request a day to take off on that day unless a manager with that managerial access overrides it. So they can go ahead, you can still process leave on those days, it's just employees can't request it. Okay, great. So to really recap what we've covered today before getting into the Q&A, I just wanted to recap a little bit. So I'll just quickly, pardon me. Wonderful. So the recap is that we went over to the views. All of those view buttons were about really thinking about how you're wanting to tackle the roster, things like weekly basis, area basis, people basis. What is your main data point that you're using to figure out your coverage? What we did is about how creating those shifts. So we did some manual ones per shift basis, very manually. And then we went into some of the automation, and that was about copying shifts and then pasting them to further weeks. We call that templating or roster templates. But then I also showed you that automation, that little, that magic wand icon. And that's about the more you use Deputy, the more it learns about how you roster and how you can really save hours and hours on rostering by clicking that button. So I implore you to spend a bit of time learning the basics of that before the automation stuff, because then you'll really see how much time you've saved. And then lastly, we went through about how to manage public holidays and blocking off those time off requests. So yeah, there's just some of the scheduling basics that we've got. We'll go through some more advanced features in future training sessions, but yeah, what I'll do is I'll just hand over to some of the next steps that we're going to be doing. Again, after this Q&A, we're going to send out a survey. We'd really love to hear your feedback on this and some of the other topics that you might want to hear about, how we did, and yeah, maybe just some of the things that we could have done better. Now, we've got a recording of this webinar that we're actually going to send out tomorrow. So please wait for that, because there might be some people who weren't able to make it who will still get a lot out of this and would really love for them to see it. Now, also, we'll have a registration for another training session that we're going to do, and it's going to be on timesheet basics. So it's actually a lot of what we've done today is going to make even more sense when we start to see the results. So it's all about building on knowledge blocks that we've built. So with rostering, we're going to think about the hypotheticals that are like, okay, so we've done rostering. So after people have worked these rosters, what does that look like in the timesheets? So we'll go through exactly all of the more manual ways that you can manage the timesheets, and also some of the automation that we've got around it too that can save you a ton of time. We're going to do that on May the 28th, but we'll have a registration link out soon, so you can actually start registering in advance. And we'll have the same format where it's recorded as well, just in case you can't make it. And very lastly, we don't have a specific date just yet, but we've got some smart scheduling webinars coming up soon on some of the new features that we've brought to scheduling. And it's going to be really good for some of the people that have joined us today to actually have a look at this webinar that's coming out. We'll have a registration link for you soon, because it's going to be quite exciting. The more you know about how Deputy does scheduling now, the cooler some of the smart scheduling updates are going to look. So really excited. What I'll do now is I'm going to hand back over to Felix, and we're going to go through the Q&A. So I'm really excited to go through that with you all. Thanks, Felix.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sam. Yes, so there has been quite a few questions. We tried to answer a lot of those already in the chat. In this session now, please, one thing I would like to mention is if you have any questions regarding reporting, timesheets, export codes, you know, location and area setup, that kind of stuff, please, you know, reach out to our support chat, because what we're covering today is actually about the scheduling part of it, and not really those other parts. There will be more webinars in the future on topics like, you know, smart scheduling or timesheets, etc. And there we can address those questions. Cool. If you have any questions right now, please raise your hand in the meeting in the bottom below, and we can address those. I'm gonna share my screen now. And we're gonna go from there. So does anyone, you know, want to ask any questions now, or should we go sort of through the Q&A first? Cool. No one so far. So where do we start? Yes, so one thing that was asked is, can you copy and paste an OpenShift? So an OpenShift is exactly like a normal shift that we put in, and can be, you know, copied, can be included in a template, for example, or yeah, I'm just going to show you this actually. If we have an OpenShift here, one thing we can easily do, you see the copy button here. You can also click on it and just press C, go over to the next day, press V. I've pressed it now a couple times. Or for example, here. There we go. So can be treated exactly like a normal shift. What else do we have? Can we see the employees? Can we sort the employees by full-time, part-time, and casual? That was a question that came through. So we cannot schedule them by you know, full-time, part-time, or casual. But what you can do is you can sort them by their role. So one thing we can do in Deputy is we can set up the access levels, which by default are system administrator, location manager, supervisor, or employee. Now, if you, for example, want to change your employees, if you want to have them set up as, you know, full-time, part-time, or casuals, then we can just copy that access level, create 3 copies of that, call them casual, full-time, part-time, and then you can sort them by role, which is a bit of a workaround, but then you would see them here sorted in you know, per role. which is, for example, now you have all the system administrators at the top, then location managers and employees. Cool. What is the difference between an open and an empty shift? Awesome question. Thanks, Philip. An open and an empty shift. Let me just put an empty shift in here as well. So the difference between an open and empty shift. First of all, what is the same? In an empty shift, you don't have an employee scheduled in there. The biggest difference is once you publish this roster, an open shift will be sent to your employees and they can actually grab that shift actively. And an empty shift doesn't get published to them. So it's basically like a placeholder that you as a manager have to fill out, basically. So if you don't roster anyone in there, if you don't drag and drop someone in there, this shift will stay empty and no one will work it. And the open shifts, they actually, the employees can grab that themselves. And while we're at that, you can also click here on edit and we can go on to shift actions and then send offers and just offer it to specific people. At the moment, no one is preferred here, but that is something you can do as well. If you have, for example, 100 employees in here and you just want to send it out to 20, you can just choose those 20 here and then send the offer out to them. Can you publish more than 1 week at a time? Good question as well. So if you, whatever you publish, I think actually Sam touched on that before. So basically all of those buttons here on the right side, including the publish button, they always action whatever you've chosen here. So if you want to publish more than a week, you can actually choose here, for example, 2-week roster or 4-week or a whole month, and then publish that. The other option is you can create multiple weeks worth of roster and then publish each week individually here. So you can go up to 6 months in the future, can create those rosters and publish them. If you want to do this in one go, make sure that you choose the right time, the right sort of time frame here. The maximum there is 1 month. Publish that in one go. What else do we have? Can we set up the employees' maximum hours? Like if I want to give a certain employee 20 hours max. Yes, so this is something that we call stress profile in the system. It's technically not part of this session because it is something you set up in the people tab. So let me actually just quickly go on here. We just edit profile here. And then under job information here, you have the stress profile. So if you set the stress profile to 20 hours a week, then you would see when you're rostering this person on, and you're rostering Abby on for more than 20 hours, it will actually come up with a warning and will tell you that the stress profile for Abby is reached for this week.
Yeah, actually, Felix, we have a ton of awesome questions around, like, for example, average hours per day, a lot of stuff that pertains to people and locations. And I think that we might get to those questions with the supporting articles very shortly. But yeah, we'll try and stick to the schedule if we can. But yeah, we'll provide context around each of them for sure. We've got a ton of awesome questions. I'm looking through them now.
Yes, with that said as well, we will send out answers to those questions afterwards, as there's so many that came in, and some of them are actually very specific regarding specific industries or specific accounts. So we'll probably not be able to go through all of them today. So that Was there one that you choose?
I've got one.
Sam?
I've got one here that's just like, can you explain the difference between location and area? I'd love to.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, that's like a nice easy one. We touched on it at the start of the training session, but it's about figuring out what the difference between like the actual location that people are going to work, and then what are the duties that pertain in that? What are the roles and duties within a location, and then that's how you start to, that kind of mindset allows you to start thinking about what is a location and what is an area. So in this case, we've got the headquarters, or Tony's Flowers in Brisbane, that's the store, and then within that store we've got duties like events and stock take and online orders, and then they're the areas that we're going to assign people to. Because then when we get into that, areas have certain qualifications and training requirements that we can start to set up so the right people are assigned to the right area, so to speak. So I hope that answers that question, but if it doesn't, please let us know, and we'll post some more illustrations later on.
Correct. And to add one more layer to this, we call this locations and areas, but they are technically just hierarchy steps within the system. So your account is the highest part of the hierarchy. Then you have locations, which is the next step. Then you have areas within those locations, just what Sam just explained. And then you have employees working in those areas. You can use those areas differently in your account. They don't have to be like a location, don't have to be a physical location. It can be, you know, an area within one physical location, if this works better for you in your business. So it is technically just a hierarchy step, but we call it locations, and areas are, you know, one step below that.
Felix, if I can, I've got a quick one here.
Yes.
Obviously someone's done exactly what I did during a trial session yesterday. They want to cancel out of the auto build. And you might have noticed, you might have been wondering why I didn't do it in the session just then. So that's because Deputy, again, it spends a lot of time thinking about all the different parts of Deputy that contribute to automatically building a roster. So to cancel out of it, you actually can't. Deputy's going to go ahead and think, and once it's done, you might not be happy with the result, so you might have accidentally clicked it like I did yesterday. And if you can just, Felix, actually illustrate this, go ahead and hit the settings button, the cog. So let's say that Deputy's gone ahead and done the auto build. You just go ahead and click delete all shifts. That was one of the, that's going to go essentially back, and that's going to help you get rid of everything that you might have accidentally created. So yeah.
Yes. Make sure before you do this, though, that again, sort of you have chosen the right, you know, time frame, view, etc. here, because you're actually deleting everything that you see right now.
Perfect.
Cool. Can we can we access this recorded session, and can the responses to the questions, can we get the responses to the questions by email? Yes, we'll send that out. I do believe tomorrow. Am I correct, Sam?
Yeah, there might be a delay. We might send out a recording of the session tomorrow, and we're going to do our best to get a list of FAQs and answers out at the same time. But if not, it'll be shortly after. But yeah, there might be a delay on those two things, but we are endeavoring to get both done.
And then we have, how long are schedules kept for post weeks? That's a good question. I do think you can actually go back from when you started with Deputy. I think we'll save everything from when you started your subscription with Deputy.
Yeah, we do have basically at the bottom right where we have that support chat functionality. You just want to engage with those folks. They're really helpful, and they'll go through an escalation process to help you with any data integrity issues and deletion of information that you can't seem to do. But we'll spend probably a specific training session on exactly how certain pieces of data get locked in. I'll touch on it, I reckon, in the timesheets one that we'll do in a few weeks' time, because again, there's a lot that we've learned today that will be built on, and will give heaps of context to all the other kind of features that Deputy have too. So stay tuned.
One more good question I saw: do you get notified when an open shift has been grabbed by an employee? You one thing that's very important here is that the person who is the rostering manager, which can be, you know, different people in different accounts. So the person that actually created and you know, published the roster. So that person will get a notification, will see it in their Me tab. Just make sure that if this is two different people, that the right person, you know, is the person that publishes the roster. And then another good question, can we copy shifts from one location to another? No, you can't. So what we do is, if you want to copy if you want to copy shifts, or if you want to copy a whole week worth of roster, and you will choose one location here, you will actually copy it over to the same location in a different week. We cannot move from one location to another location with the copying function. Same with the templates, by the way. Then we have, do you want to add something, Sam?
Oh yeah, I've got one here that we won't be able to actually explore and illustrate the answer for, but I wanted to kind of let that person, I think it was, I want to let that person know where the best place is to find it. So for example, we've got a question around pay by area or area-based pay. This is something that is managed specifically in the People tab. We won't be able to kind of illustrate it too much, but we've got some articles that we'll send out for that question around pay by area. So just stay tuned for that one. But it's all about managing pay rates for people and assigning the areas that they're going to be getting paid certain amounts for. So we'll send out an article for it, because it's a way better kind of way to learn that topic, because it can get complex. But we do manage to find an easiest way possible to digest this information for sure.
Correct. Then we have another one. Can you use one kiosk to sign in for multiple locations? Not directly a scheduling question, but yes, you can. There is a workaround where you just create a location for that kiosk and make sure that all the employees from those multiple locations that want to clock in or that need to clock in at that kiosk, that they all are attached to that location. And that would fix that problem. Just make sure that you never roster in that location. That's the only thing. And then, do you have another one, Sam?
Yeah, I'm just sifting through it now. There's so many awesome questions.
There's so many awesome ones. Can you attach a file or note to an individual staff member? Again, not really a scheduling question, but you can do that through a training requirement. So training requirements within the within a person's profile, actually, you can attach documents to that. So if you just call that training requirement, whatever the document is called that you want to attach to that person, it's then technically not always a training requirement, but you can sort of use that as a workaround and attach a file to.
We got another good one here that is, it's a people question, but it definitely reflects the topic of locations and scheduling that we're going through. Can employees be preferred in more than one location? So that is managed in the people function. So against a person, you can actually list the locations that they can work at. So you might have, for example, around the HQ, there might be like 5 different stores that are, within almost walking distance, and you might have some casuals that can work at all of them. So yes, you can assign them and allow them to be picked up based on their availability for all those stores. So but you manage this in the People tab.
And then we also have a location setup question, actually, but if I delete an area, can I reinstate it in the future? You can do that with the locations. Locations will be archived. If you delete an area, you will actually have to create that area again. So a location can be reinstated because it's archived, but an area can't.
But reinstating a location will bring back the areas that were in there for sure. But
Yes.
but a big reason why that is because there's a lot of kind of data points that affect the rest of the Deputy kind of platform that pertain in a location. So, for example, like people are associated with locations, addresses are in there, timesheets are tagged, tons of information kind of gets locked in based on a location. It's kind of one of the foundation structure parts of building a Deputy account as locations, and that's why there's a archiving. It's harder to delete it for good reason, and that's why in areas though there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of editing and a lot of cool things that you can do with areas that are way more flexible data wise, and that's why it appears as though it's easier to delete an area than a location.
Correct. Another good one I saw here is I don't see reports at the top of my Deputy. Also, when I don't have the option to take public holiday. So this could be the reason, or the reason for this could be your access level. Make sure that you have the right access level to see all of those. So if you're, for example, logged in as an employee, you would see only the Me tab, newsfeed tasks, and your own schedule. You would not see any of the other ones. If you want to have more information on that, in our help portal, help.deputy.com, if you type in their access levels, you will see exactly what permissions each access level has, and also which one you are on. And then you can see, this would be the reason why you have no access to reports.
We've got, in the notes section in adding a new shift, can these comments come over to timesheet comments? No, like the shift notes don't translate in the timesheets, but you can have some shift notes translate in the timesheets. We'll probably go through that in way more detail in the session that unfortunately is going to be in 2 weeks. But I'll try and get a bit more answers for that question before the 28th of May. But we'll definitely be illustrating it and diving way deeper into why that is and how it looks and how to get it working when we go through that training session. But so stay tuned for that one. But there is a way to kind of get what you're looking for there.
Perfect. Okay, we are at the, we do want to be aware of time, and we are at the end of our training session. Thanks for all these awesome questions. We will probably need a little bit of time to address them all, and then we'll send out a recording and the answers to everyone probably tomorrow, and then we go from there. Yes.
Yeah,
thank
you
to
everyone who joined us. Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks so much. Great questions,
Amazing.
everyone.
Cool. Thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.